indecision is not an intelligence issue. Honestly, the smarter you are, the more you deal with indecision because you see so many different angles and you think so much, right? So actually, the smartest people I work with tend to be the ones that struggle the most with this. It's not a strategy issue. It's not like, oh, if I just find the right strategy, I'll finally stop questioning my decisions. And it's definitely not a discipline problem. I feel like so many people beat themselves up about why can't I make this decision? Why am I so indecisive? It's not about being an indecisive person. It's about not having a framework or a structure for being able to make the decision in a way that actually works based on the research around decision making. So, generally, if you're struggling with indecision, there's something specific making it difficult. And once you find out what that is and address it, then getting out of that indecision and making the decision is actually faster than you might expect. Most business advice is built on one key assumption that what worked for someone else will work for you too. The Nourished CEO podcast exists to challenge that assumption and point to a better way. I'm Laura Schoenfeld, strategic advisor and business coach with over 15 years of experience online and multiple millions of dollars earned from my own business. I'm also a mom of two and a devoted wife who runs it all in about 20 hours a week. This show is for the established coach, consultant, or service provider who is done following someone else's playbook and is ready to build a joyful, profitable business from their own authority. Every episode is a direct, no filters conversation about the real challenges you're facing in your business, with honest strategy and practical action steps that you can actually use right now. Because working smarter and building something sustainable matters a lot more than just chasing a bigger number. No recycled advice or empty inspiration here, just honest, integrity-driven conversations about building a business that fits your life as much as it fits your goals, so that it gives more than it takes while nourishing everything you're building outside of it. If that sounds like the breath of fresh air you're looking for, you're in the right place. Hey there, welcome back to the Nourished CEO podcast. I'm Laura Schoenfeld, and today we're talking all about why smart entrepreneurs struggle to make decisions. This is something that I have been seeing in pretty much every single coaching program that I'm running, whether that is the NBA program that we're wrapping up this year or my new beta round of the Foundry, my one-on-one calls, and then even in my own life. So it's literally everywhere. And I know there's a lot of stuff going on energetically that's making it difficult for people to make decisions right now, but it's something that I see pretty much all the time, where really smart people who have so much to offer their clients, the world, they just are really bright lights that I want to see be so successful. And so much of what gets in their way is indecision. So if you are in this situation where you have a really big decision that's been sitting on the back burner for weeks or months, or maybe you have like 5 different decisions that you're trying to make it all at the same time. You keep having decisions that you've made that then you revisit weeks later and then unmake them. There's so many different ways that indecision shows up. And then it's like you're journaling about it. You're asking your coach. You are asking your friends. You're talking to your spouse about it. You tried to sleep on it. And, now you've slept on it 100 times and you're halfway through the year and you still haven't made a decision. You still haven't pulled the trigger. That situation is way more common than I think anyone is talking about. And it creates a ton of problems, not only in your business, but really in your life and how you feel and how running a business even works for you as a real person with real needs. As you probably know, if you've been listening to this podcast for a while, the concept of the Nourished CEO is that the way that you feel as the owner, operator, founder of your business actually affects the performance of your business. And my goal for all my clients is for them to have a business that feels as good as it performs. And I don't know about you, but being stuck in indecision feels terrible. Now, one of the reasons why I'm bringing this up today is because we are about a little over halfway through the Foundry beta round, this new program that I'm running, the first round that we've ever run. And we did an intake survey as well as a midpoint survey. And I'm seeing a lot of patterns around decision making. So in the intake survey, so as soon as somebody joined, as soon as we were getting started, I had them fill out a survey. And we kept seeing the same thing in different words. One person said they were exhausted by thinking about whether what they're doing is a good next step. Another person described being in, quote, spiraling indecisions, and she wanted help taking it step by step to make those decisions. Multiple people inside this group said the same thing, which is that they wanted to stop going back and forth on these questions, on these decisions. Things like pricing, their offer, their niche, their sales process, their messaging, stuff that even if they've been in business for years, like they still feel unresolved about it. And that honestly was a big focus of even the intention around the Foundry program, was really helping people make decisions. So it makes sense that a lot of our people came into the program with that as a problem. So we just did our midpoint survey a couple weeks ago. And when I was reviewing it, I saw a really big pattern around the specific shifts that people are experiencing. And it was really interesting because it really came down to how they were making decisions. So one person said that she went from lots of overthinking and overanalyzing to catching herself and stepping back to evaluate the decision first before she got all spun up around in circles. Another person went from deciding based on what she thought she was supposed to do to deciding based on how she's actually wired and what's best for her and her strengths, which is a huge focus of the Foundry program. And multiple people use the words grounded and confident and hopeful about their business, when before they had described spinning in indecision, feeling doubt, and really being exhausted by all of the things they were trying to make decisions on in their business. So that's a big change in, I think, like 5 weeks of the Foundry, just seeing this change from feeling exhausted by how many decisions that they were sitting in to actually having a step-by-step process and guidelines and filters for making those decisions. And I truly believe that indecision is one of the most expensive things that you can have in your business as a cost, more than hiring a coach, more than hiring a team member, more than spending ads. Like the money that you lose every week from spinning an indecision has got to be worth tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars in a business. Now, when you have the right decision-making filter, when you have an actual strategy for making a decision confidently and consistently, in the sense that the decision doesn't like get reopened weeks later, because I think that's something that's really common. You make a decision and then like all of a sudden you question it and then you go back and now it's basically like you never made the decision. When you're able to make those decisions confidently, everything in your business moves faster. And so that's what our conversation today is going to be about. Now, I promise that indecision is not an intelligence issue. Honestly, I think the smarter you are, the more you deal with indecision because you see so many different angles and you think so much, right? So actually, the smartest people I work with tend to be the ones that struggle the most with this. It's not a strategy issue. It's not like, oh, if I just find the right strategy, I'll finally stop questioning my decisions. And it's definitely not a discipline problem. I feel like so many people beat themselves up about, why can't I make this decision? Why am I so indecisive? It's not about being an indecisive person. It's about not having a framework or a structure for being able to make the decision in a way that actually works based on the research around decision making. So generally, if you're struggling with indecision, there's something specific making it difficult. And once you find out what that is and address it, then getting out of that indecision and making the decision is actually faster than you might expect. So what we're going to cover in this episode is the real cost of a decision. So what is it actually doing to you to not make decisions in a confident and quick way? I'll share 7 specific reasons why really smart entrepreneurs get stuck in indecision. And I'm going to share some specific action steps or ways of looking at the problem that actually work to get out of indecision. And this is based on research that exists around why people struggle to make decisions and what kind of things get in the way of making confident decisions. So let's talk first about what indecision is actually costing you, because most people think the cost is just like the decision not getting made. And that's actually one of the smaller parts. So, yeah, the decision getting delayed costs you something, but there's other costs that you might not even be realizing when you are kicking the can on a decision or you're just swirling around it and not actually finalizing it. So, the first cost of indecision is that it drains your mental energy even when you're not thinking about it. So when you think about your brain, think about it like a computer with too many tabs open. I am notoriously horrible about not only too many tabs, but my husband always points out the fact that I use both tabs and windows, which is like very, very unhelpful. I don't know why I do that. Maybe I have ADHD or something, but when you have too many tabs open, too many windows running, too many things using the computer's memory all at once, everything slows down. So even if you're not actively using that window, the window you are using actually goes slower because of all of the power that those multiple open tabs are using. So when you have a lot of unresolved decisions in your brain, that's actually just like one of those open tabs running in the background, using up your brain's processing power constantly. So it's not just when you're trying to make the decision, it's literally if that decision just stays in your brain basically has to hold it for you. And that causes you to lose energy. This is why chronic indecision makes you feel more foggy, makes you feel like your brain's slowing down across the board. This is an actual resource drain on your brain functioning. And if you're a parent, if you're a mom like me, or you have little kids, like literally, we all know our brains change postpartum. We all know it changes as a parent. Even dads, their brains change after having kids. But like if you're experiencing mom brain or you're going through perimenopause and your cognitive function is getting affected, if you have unanswered questions and undecided decisions that are draining more of your brain power, it's just going to make things worse. And I noticed this when I am dealing with family stuff. Like there are so many decisions you have to make when you have kids, and it's just getting more and more as we add kids and, the kids get older. All of those decisions drain energy to make, and then add insult to injury with the undecided decisions, they're running in the background. So this isn't about organizing your thoughts differently. This isn't about like writing to-do lists. This is literally about noticing what decisions are not actually finalized and getting those out and actually making the decisions so that you're not constantly circling around the decision in your brain in the background. So it's basically like closing that tab by deciding. The second cost of indecision is while you're thinking, opportunities and the windows of opportunities are closing. If you are waiting to make a decision, you are not preserving your opportunities or your options. By waiting, it's actually closing some of the options that you would have had available to you if you had made the decision sooner. So, how does this show up in business? Our industry changes so fast. So, competitors make moves, context shifts, like what's going on in the world and how is that affecting what your audience is looking for or what they're paying attention to or what their desires are. Technology is changing. So if you're delaying decisions, by the time you decide, the entire landscape of your industry might look different, and you might have to start over with that decision anyway, because now your constraints or the factors that you're trying to plan for or the way that your audience is making buying decisions may have completely changed. Or the worst thing that happens is when you think you're going to do something in your business and you keep waiting and waiting and waiting, and then one of your competitors shows up on your newsfeed and you see, oh my gosh, she just launched the thing I've been wanting to launch. That is the worst feeling ever. So I'm not saying you should rush decisions, but if you're unnecessarily delaying them and putting them off into the future, by the time you're ready to make that decision, it's almost like you have to start from scratch because so much can change in the time that it takes you to actually nail down that decision. The third cost of indecision is stress on your nervous system. Your nervous system treats an unresolved decision just like a physical or psychological threat. So you get those same stress hormones, the same alarm state, the same stress that comes from like a bear in the woods. You get that same kind of low grade nervous system threat response from constantly stressing about a decision. So if you're carrying multiple unresolved decisions, that's going to affect how you feel on a day-to-day basis from a stress state, not just an energy state, but it'll eat into how well you're sleeping. I mean, we've all been there before where you're worried about a decision, you're thinking about it, and then you try to go to bed and your brain is just like spinning on it. So you're not sleeping as well. You're more emotionally dysregulated. You just can't think as clearly. And then that feels stressful because there's a lot of decisions you have to make in your life and your business. This is something that compounds over time and it makes everything feel so much more high stress and high stakes than it needs to. And then that adds insult to injury by making it harder to make a decision because if everything feels way higher stakes than it is, it's going to be harder to make a decision because you're putting so much pressure on yourself. So it's really this self-fulfilling prophecy where unresolved decisions actually then create the sensation of high stakes, high stress, and then that high stress makes it harder to make decisions. The fourth big issue, and this is honestly probably one of the biggest long-term costs to your business, every time you don't make a decision or you delay a decision or you regret waiting too long to make a decision, you actually chip away at your self-trust. There is a lot of people are talking about this concept of a self-trust recession right now. Like we have all heard the trust recession, but the self-trust recession is where we have all of these entrepreneurs who've had so many experiences where they couldn't make a decision or they made a decision out of stress or fear or undue influence from somebody, and then they regretted that decision and it chips away at their self-trust. This is truly, I would say, the most expensive long-term cost because high self-trust as an entrepreneur is one of the most important things that you need to have in order to keep growing your business and to keep being able to lead your business, not only yourself, but also your team members, your clients, your industry, not the competition, but just how you're showing up online and how you feel when you are putting yourself out there. If you do not trust yourself, all of that is going to be so much harder to do. So every time you can't pull the trigger on a decision, your brain is going to file that as a data point to build this belief that you are someone who doesn't trust yourself. Because if you trusted yourself, you would make the decision, right? So not making the decisions or swirling around the decisions or second guessing the decisions or making them and then coming back and unmaking them, you are giving your brain evidence that you do not trust yourself. And then that becomes an identity piece that drives the way that you show up for the rest of your business. So that compounds over time until even very low stakes decisions feel hard. We've all been there before where it's like you're trying to decide to do something and it's really not that big of a deal, but you feel so low in your self-trust capacity that you're just paralyzed about making the decision. And that is something that grows over time. The more and more you do not actually finalize the decision, whether it's a big decision or a little one. So the flip side of this is that making a decision, even if it's an imperfect decision, even if it's one that does not turn out the way you expected, trusting yourself to decide actually builds that self-trust faster almost than anything else. So we need to flex that self-trust muscle all the time as an entrepreneur. And the stronger your self-trust muscle gets, the more your business actually has the capacity to grow and to hold as far as the container of financial resources, clients, if we think about the energetics of running a business, that is one of the things that self-trust allows you to do is to build that bigger container. And it's something you have to practice. If you are stuck on indecision, that is actually a decision. You are deciding not to decide. And that's a decision that's just made by default instead of with intention and by design. And it almost always costs more than the risk you were avoiding. That is something you really, really need to take home from this conversation today, is that the cost of indecision, whether short-term or long-term, is almost guaranteed to be higher than the cost of making a decision that did not turn out the way you wanted it to. All right. Now let's get into the 7 reasons why smart entrepreneurs get stuck in indecision. This is not because you're incapable or you're just like not qualified to be an entrepreneur or you're just like always going to be like this. This is not a personality trait. These are patterns that are really predictable. Now, the reason why they feel so much like this is just who you are and how you make decision is because a lot of times they feel very rational. They feel very evidence-based, and your brain is going to make a lot of excuses for why the way that you're making decisions is actually the right way to do things. This is something we need to train our brains out of and to really rewire our decision-making pathway. And it helps to understand the different reasons why you might be getting stuck because you can actually see things from a different angle when you see the root cause. So the first reason that a lot of smart entrepreneurs get stuck in indecision is that they're actually trying to solve the wrong problem with the decision that they're making. So you're trying to answer this question, you're trying to make a decision, you're trying to choose how you're going to move forward, but you're not even actually looking at what the real question is. You're looking at the surface level, and that surface level question is actually a symptom of something deeper that has not been identified yet. So that's one of the reasons why no matter how long you think about it, you're not going to have that clarity on how to move forward because you're actually analyzing the wrong thing. It's kind of like if you have a chronic headache that in reality is caused by dehydration. Yeah, like taking some ibuprofen will help for a few hours, but it's just going to come back. And taking all the ibuprofen in the world is not going to fix that chronic headache until you get hydrated and you drink some water, right? So we need to make sure you're solving the right problem when you're making that decision. A lot of times this is like there's a belief underlying the question that you're not addressing. There is a different issue underneath that you actually need to make the decision about. Things like, should I raise my prices? That's a really common decision. Should technically be an easy one. It's not really rocket science to decide if you're going to raise your prices, but there's a lot of other underlying things that can affect that decision. Do you believe your results are worth more than you're charging? Do you believe that the market actually can bear that price increase? Do you feel like it's fair to increase your prices? Like there's so many things underlying that. It's not just a simple should I or shouldn't I raise my prices? Because like I said, that's usually just a math question. Should I change my niche? Like the people that are circling their niche question. I have a client like this in the Foundry program right now who actually realized she'd been circling this indecision around did she want to change her niche? But it turns out she didn't want to change her niche. She just wanted to actually elevate her avatar to a different type of person with that problem because she was getting a lot of people that were very, very emotionally draining for her. And she was blaming the problem that she solved, not the messaging that was attracting a certain type of person, right? So trying to decide if she should change her niche is not really the issue. The issue is, am I actually filtering the right clients? And have I even decided what those right clients are so that I can get people into my world that actually make my business enjoyable to run? And this person actually said in her intake that having that indecision around who she serves was affecting every other decision. This is actually one of the reasons why we go in a specific order in the Foundry program, because I am finding, and this is like honestly how we've run things for years at this point, but I've never operationalized it until I built the Foundry curriculum. There is very much an order of operations in a business, and there's certain decisions, they're almost like domino decisions. When you make that one decision, then every other decision gets easier. So this particular client was trying to solve 5 different decisions at the same time and totally spinning out about them. But in reality, there was only one decision she had to make. And it was, do I still want to serve the same people that I'm serving? And she said it herself. She said, if I knew deeply who I served, everything else would fall into place. So rather than spinning around 5 different decisions, understanding like what is the actual decision I need to make, and then is there anything underneath that decision that's actually the real decision that I need to make so that everything else gets easier. I've even had I've had this experience in my own business recently. I have been really going back and forth on a decision around adding a mastermind to my business for months at this point. And I haven't run a mastermind since my last one was 2021 that I ran. I stopped the year that I had my first child because I was like, becoming a mom, there's a lot of energy, a lot of time, a lot of changes that happen. I did not want to also have that responsibility of running a mastermind on top of that. And so it's been a few years since I ran one. And there's been multiple years recently that I was like, do I bring it back? People have been asking me about it. And yeah, on the surface, the question could be, should I run a mastermind or not? I even thought maybe the decision was, do I have the bandwidth for a mastermind or not? And I realized recently the decision that I really needed to make was, am I ready to hold a more advanced container again? Because I've had some experiences with running masterminds where it's not just about, do I have the capacity for the deliverables? It's about, do I actually have the bandwidth for holding that container? Am I ready for that? Am I ready to actually lead a more advanced container? That was really the decision. It wasn't, do I have the time or is there demand in the market? Like, I think there's a lot of things that I could have focused on, but the ultimate question is, am I ready to hold that more advanced container again? It's been a few years. I've changed. My audience has changed. And I had to sit with that. I had to make that decision. So if you are struggling with this, first start with the decision you think you have to make, write it in one sentence, and then ask yourself, is this actually the decision that I need to make? Or is there something more fundamental underneath that I actually need to decide on? This is going to be a very internal process to journal on, but it's literally just like, is there something underneath this? And keep asking, what is this really about? What's underneath this? Until you get to that place where something feels uncomfortably true, like, oh, that feels a little harsh to think about. That's probably the real decision that you need to make. Because I think it's so easy to stay surface level because we don't want to deal with the uncomfortable emotions that come up when the actual decision is maybe more emotionally charged than just, do I do this or not? But if you never answer that question, if you never make that decision, you'll never actually be able to make the surface level decision because your brain will always try to protect you from the emotions that are driving that indecision. So it's sometimes you'll be surprised how deep you have to go. You might have to ask yourself 10 times what is underneath that decision before you find the thing that's the actual root. Reason number 2, which is pretty much related to this, but a little bit different, is that an unrelated emotion is actually running the show. So the simple explanation here is that your emotional state going into a decision, even if the emotional state is completely irrelevant to the decision itself, will actually impact what you decide and how quickly you can decide. So when you're coming in stressed, anxious, tired, fearful, angry, like any of those negative emotions, it will impact the way that you think about the decision you need to make, and your brain will make you think you're being rational. This is something called incidental emotions. This is when feelings from a different situation bleed into how you evaluate something completely different. That can be fear from a past failure that makes a new opportunity feel risky. It could be that you've had an exhausting week and that makes another decision in your business feel like too much. This is something I see a lot with my clients who are really trying to get out of that burnout state where they're so tired from white knuckling their business that simple decisions now are stressful because they're so exhausted from other things going on in their life. So this shows up where now you're feeling more fear about the decision. You're feeling less capable of handling the decision, even if the fear is about something else entirely. Again, it could be like something going on with your marriage, something going on with your family, and it bleeds into the decisions you're making in your business. And now you are stressed and indecisive about the thing you're trying to do in your business. This is why those costs of indecision are so important, because if you're stressed and exhausted from overall indecisiveness, and then you're trying to make a decision and now you're indecisive, it is a self-fulfilling prophecy there. Now, the signal that this is an issue is that your reaction or your emotional response to the decision itself feels way bigger or way more resistant than what the actual stakes of that decision warrant. So little decisions around like, should you hire a VA or not? I mean, I'm not saying that's a tiny decision, but it's not like a life altering decision. You just are so stressed about it. Or you're trying to decide if you should raise the price of your offer and you're just like getting so stuck on it. And it's just a math problem, right? So if it's like, wow, I'm like really, really blowing this out of proportion to make this decision, then ask yourself, like, what else is going on in my life or what else could be from my past that is actually affecting my decision making here. We had a client recently in our NBA program have an experience where she put out a reel that did really well for her. It hit 11,000 views. She got 200 new followers from it. She got hundreds of comments on it. It was getting shared. Most people would be so excited about that. They'd be like, yes, my content's finally working. And I think she thought about that for like 10 seconds. And then all of a sudden she was spiraling. She said, what do I do with all these people? What if I can't keep up with this? Even worse, what if they come to my page and then they realize I don't know what I'm doing, because she was dealing with imposter syndrome. None of that was actually about this one reel, because nobody was like, it's not like she was getting a bunch of people harassing her, right? People, if you've ever gone mega viral, I've had clients have this before where it's like millions of views and it's just pulling people from all corners of the internet where they're just like being totally awful. That wasn't even it. Like, this was just a well-performing reel with a lot of interest. And she just started freaking out about it. After some digging, we realized that this was actually fear that was coming from a previous burnout experience that she had had years prior that was bleeding into how she was responding to the high-performing reel. So she was like stressing out, like, what am I going to do? How am I going to handle this? What if all of a sudden I get all these people that want to work with me? Like, you would think good problems to have if all of a sudden her demand goes up, but she was treating it like this big threat. And it was because she had had a burnout experience a few years prior. So our coach worked with her to separate the facts from the fiction, the story she was telling herself versus what the reality was. In all likelihood, she was not going to go from like handling her business to fully burnt out from one reel going well. And it was really important for her to realize this, because if she didn't realize this, she would have pumped the brakes on how visible she was being on social media, and that would actually hurt the growth of her business. So this is a great example of where something from years ago that was triggering the emotion was then affecting how she was making the decision about what to do moving forward with her social media account. Side note, this is something that certain modes of therapy or somatic work can be really helpful with. I did a half-day EMDR session earlier this year, and it was very intense, but I found that made a huge impact on some of that residual emotional reaction from things that have happened to me in the past, not even that long ago past, but like even in the last few years, that was then bleeding into my decision-making in the business currently. I've had clients also do EMDR and they've had similar experiences. And so this is where regulating your physical and emotional state is actually part of the decision-making process. So if you're needing to make a decision, whether it's big or small, make sure you check on your emotional and physical state first. It's not about the decision. It's about, how are you feeling right now? Are you in a good state to make a decision? Because if you're not feeling good, if you're not feeling even just emotionally neutral, it will affect the decision that you make or how you make the decision, or even if you make the decision. So if you feel like you're carrying emotion either from something going on in your current situation or something that has been bothering you for years, we need to address that first before you start evaluating the decision that needs to be made. That could be something that's very easy to fix in the short term if you have tools for dealing with just physical and emotional stress, or it might be something that needs some deeper digging over time. But just know that making decisions in a very emotional state is not likely going to work out too well for you. Reason number 3, this is a big one, is that the decision has become a verdict on who you are or your identity. I have run into this one before, more often than I want to admit. And this is where the decision actually then becomes a referendum on your worth, your capability, or whether you are actually who you say you are. So you're not even weighing options of a decision anymore. You're literally trying to protect your self-image, your identity from what could be a pretty damning conclusion. This is where you're trying to make a decision, especially dealing with problems in your business, which we all deal with problems. This is not a level of business where you hit where suddenly you don't deal with problems. You have to make a tough decision, and all of a sudden all the garbage thinking comes up. So things like, well, if I make this change and it doesn't work, it means I was wrong all along and I don't make good decisions. Or if I pivot or if I change my mind about something, it means I've been misleading people, which then makes you a liar. If this doesn't sell, it means that I'm not as good as I thought. If this thing that I realize isn't working, if I shut it down, maybe that means I'm a fraud. Those kind of thoughts, they come up and maybe you're not even noticing them. I tend to notice them pretty quick at this point because it like literally sounds like somebody else is like talking to me and saying like, who do you think you are? You're not as good as you think you are. You're a fraud. Like any of that stuff can come up. And all of a sudden, instead of it just being a decision, should I do this or should I not do this? Now it's like, are you even who you think you are? This is really, really common for coaches, experts, practitioners, because for a lot of us, our identity is tied so directly to our expertise and the results that we get, not only for our clients, but also in our business, like the financial results, especially if you're a coach that does business coaching or financial coaching. If you make a decision that does not turn out well financially, now it's like, oh my gosh, am I even who I think I am? So when you get into that situation, that can create so much extra stress on the decision and make it so much higher stakes because you're not just making a decision for the business, you're making a decision about who you are. And that feels really threatening to your brain and your subconscious. I've been noticing so many of our Foundry members experiencing this. They're questioning their niche, their offer, their sales process, their messaging, their pricing, all those things. And ultimately, it turns out that they're really just questioning themselves. They're like, can I actually help these people? Is my stuff really that good? Do I know what I'm talking about? Those kind of questions that are actually identity questions, not logistics questions for their business. So I mean, I think all of us go through this kind of stuff. I'm in a pretty big identity reevaluation year this year. And really, I'm in the middle of a decision in my personal life that affects not only the business, but really our family. And I haven't made the decision yet. It's really a decision between me and my husband. We have not made the decision yet. We were talking about it literally last night, and it has brought up a lot of self-worth and identity things that like, oh, I didn't realize those were still there. Because if I look at the decision on the surface, it is pretty straightforward, the pros and cons. I'm not saying it's an easy decision, but it's not something that is like rocket science, right? It's like it could be a fairly easy decision on what to do to move forward. But what I realize is that there's a lot of underlying self-belief that is on the decision. So if I decide to go in a certain direction, my brain says, well, if you do that, that means that you failed at what you set out to build. And if you've ever had that experience before where the decision feels like it's literally like sealing the deal on you being a failure, that is a very, very difficult decision to make. And that could be one of the big reasons you're struggling with indecision. So once I realized that that was the underlying identity issue for the decision itself, I'm not saying it was easy, and I still think I need to work through it, but it made me realize that's why I'm so anxious about this decision. It's not just about the decision itself. It's about what am I making it mean if we decide to do things this way. So I'm still working through separating the story that my brain has attached to that decision, but even just acknowledging it makes it so much easier than if I was just letting those tapes run in the background and then like stressing the F out of the decision. So to actually get to the root of this, the best question you can ask yourself here is, what do I think this decision means about me? Because it's probably not just the decision. It's probably that there is some sort of story that is your brain's telling you, if you make this decision, this is what it means about you. So that's how you can find if it's an identity block. And ultimately, anytime you make a decision, it's not permanent evidence of who you are. And in fact, being willing to make hard decisions is actually evidence of what you are capable of. And so if you do realize it's something that's attached to your identity, if you can actually attach the process of deciding to a positive sense of self, that now makes the decision way easier than if you're making it this like, if you do it this way, that means you're a loser, you're a failure, like any of that stuff that is so easy to come up in a high stakes decision. Suddenly it's like, hey, even just being willing to make that hard decision means that you're tough and you're capable and you're willing to do hard things, right? So it's really a matter of redefining that story. Reason number 4, and this is a really common one for my overthinking clients, you're trying to solve for every possible future before you take the first step. So instead of just looking to make the best decision possible with the information you have right now, you're trying to account for every single scenario that might come up later. So you're like, what if this happens? But what if this happens? And what if that happens? The reality is, most of the things you're thinking about not only don't exist yet, but they won't actually ever exist. And you're just trying to accommodate all of those potential futures without actually knowing if any of them are ever going to happen. And that makes the decision so much harder because instead of just making one decision, now you're trying to deal with like 10 different things. And the reality is, for most decisions, you can only actually discover what's going to happen by doing the thing. So this shows up like you're trying to launch a new program and you haven't even enrolled any clients yet, and you're trying to deal with every possible problem that somebody might deal with inside of your program. You don't know if they're going to deal with that program, but your brain's like, but what if this is a problem? And what if they don't like this? And what if this doesn't happen? You spend weeks on a contingency that you may never actually even need. You keep stalling because you're like, well, what if this happens? What if that happens? And it may never happen. It hasn't happened yet, and it may never happen. So you're spending all this time dealing with something that's never actually going to happen. What you're really trying to do is eliminate uncertainty before you take that step, and that is not possible. You can never eliminate uncertainty from a decision. And if that's what you're trying to do, that's why you're stuck in indecision. Uncertainty doesn't go away just from more thinking and more planning. It literally just delays you from actually seeing what happens. And the worst part is, a lot of times what happens is not even something that you prepared for. The information that you usually need to make better decisions is on the other side of making the next best decision. So I'm not saying that you might not have to deal with some of those issues. What I'm saying is trying to think about every single possible thing that could go wrong by making that decision is making that decision way harder for you. So I have a client in the Foundry program who just enrolled 4 new clients into her program, which it's a new program. She's very excited about it. Big financial win, big win as a business owner. But instead of just being like, all right, let's go, let's figure it out as we go along, that enrollment process then sent her into a thought spiral because she's like, well, should my calls be 45 minutes? Should they be 30 minutes? Should we do weekly calls? Should we do every other week? Should I ask my clients what they want and then just accommodate it? Or should I make the decision ahead of time? What if these 2 modules happening in this time frame is too much? Like, what if my client has this, specific symptom and they need a different approach? Like, literally, you could come up with 1,000 different things that you might need to come up with. Every single question she was spinning on was hypothetical. She hadn't run a single call yet. She had not delivered any of the program yet. She was trying to design a perfect program for every possible version of every possible client that she could work with before she ever had any actual real data to make decisions from. So my coaching was pretty simple. I was like, just go with what you think is the best choice with the information that you have. Use your clinical judgment, use your expertise to just choose something, and you will learn more from your first 2 sessions with a real group, then you're going to learn from another 2 weeks of thinking about what might happen. And then I really had to reinforce her expertise because that's another piece of it, right? If you question your own expertise, you don't trust that you can handle things, right? So I reminded her that if something comes up that you did not anticipate, you will handle it then. That is not a risk that you need to build a contingency plan for. That is just a normal part of the process. And that's how expertise works. True expertise is the ability to handle things that come up that were unexpected, not just, oh, I've thought through every possible scenario and covered them all in my planning process. So when we checked in with her a few weeks later with that midpoint survey, she had sold another 3 spots of her 5-spot goal. And that version of the program that she was trying to perfect in her head was no longer holding her back. She got out of her head and she actually got into the room with real clients to be able to serve them and to adapt as time went on. So you need to ask yourself, are you just doing due diligence planning or are you trying to eliminate uncertainty? Because if the answer is that you're trying to eliminate uncertainty, you need to know that you will never do that. And I would encourage you to think about what are you really afraid of is going to happen that all of this like contingency planning is trying to account for. And then once you realize, okay, what am I really afraid of? Then ask yourself, well, if that did happen, how would I handle it? Because a lot of times, like the reason you're so afraid is because you've never had to deal with something like that before. You're like worried it's going to happen and you're like, I don't know how I would do it because I've never dealt with it before. If you think, well, what if it does happen? What would I do? Then you actually realize, oh, it's probably not that big of a deal. I probably already know how I would handle it. And that can build your confidence as a decision maker and an expert so that you're not getting stuck in this like, well, I don't know if this is going to happen. I don't know if that is going to happen. I don't know how I'd handle that. And then now you're just like completely talking yourself out of even doing the thing. Reason number 5 is that the real constraint has not been identified. So constraints are really things that are affecting the feasibility of a solution. And a lot of times you're not even objectively thinking about them. This is honestly one of the things that coaching can really help with because you may not even realize the constraints that are affecting your ability to make a decision because you have blind spots, and it takes somebody else on the outside to say, hey, have you thought about this? Have you considered that maybe this is the issue? Maybe this is the actual thing we need to look at instead of the thing that you think is the problem. This is actually more common than you think because if you're stuck in a decision, you're so blinded by focusing on that decision that you're not really looking at the big picture. And a lot of times it takes somebody else to bring up the big picture for you so that you are actually looking at, hey, like what is the actual circumstance or the constraints that I'm trying to make this decision in? And let's make sure that those are being addressed so that the decision doesn't feel like this nebulous, like, what should I do? What should the strategy be? Where should I go? But you're not even considering the factors that actually matter. So I work with one of my one-on-one clients. She is a dietitian who works with women who binge eat, and she's like averaging somewhere around like the 25 to 30K per month mark, which most people would be like super stoked about, right? Like 30K months as a dietitian is amazing. And she should be very proud of herself. But she came to a call recently feeling like she was totally burnt out and she was borderline ready to quit. And she kept looking at different parts of her business that would indicate why did she feel so burnt out. She kept thinking like, not enough people are buying, or my messaging isn't right, or the ads aren't getting the right people, like all of those things that she was really like micromanaging as far as the decision was concerned. But when we actually sat down and looked at the whole picture together, the real constraint came out, which was that her business model, which was an evergreen model, required her to basically be selling every single day, every single week with no breaks. Evergreen meant selling all the time. And she is in a situation in her life where she only has about 12 hours, and they're very fragmented hours every week, to work. She hadn't been able to get into a flow state in months. She's got a baby about my baby's age. And if you have a, 1 to 1.5 year old, you know how much mental energy they take. And so there was all this stuff going on in her personal life that was affecting her ability to show up and sell every day. And she wasn't considering the fact that, hey, maybe this whole sell all the time evergreen model is not actually compatible with the way that you work, the way that your energy is, the constraints you have in your life. So she hadn't really thought about that directly. She was really like lost in the details, and working with me one-on-one allowed her to have somebody on the outside to say, hey, is evergreen even the right fit for your personality, your strengths, how you like to approach business, and what your life circumstances are like right now? So being able to look at that then made the decision very different. And we were then able to make a series of decisions that addressed those constraints. And it had nothing to do with her close rate or her messaging. It was literally like, hey, this business model is not actually the best match for the constraints that you're dealing with right now. And that completely changed how she felt about the whole thing, because she realized like, oh, all of that stuff I've been banging my head on the wall about is not actually what I need to be thinking about. And all of that will work itself out when we make these changes to the business model. So, like I said, it's really helpful if you can get an outsider's opinion, and ideally somebody who is an expert in business to do this, because people that have not run businesses are not necessarily going to know what to look at. But having some sort of objective input around what are all the different constraints and the different factors to consider, because if you're not looking at those, the decisions you're making will not actually have the information that you need to be a clear and confident decision. So if you want to do this yourself, it's really just trying to brainstorm and brain dump all the different things that could affect your decision, because sometimes you'll find some stuff that you're like, oh, I didn't even think about the fact that I need a break from selling once in a while. Like, she just didn't want to be selling all the time. And if you don't want to be selling all the time, then having a business model that requires you to sell all the time is definitely not a good fit. Reason number 6 for why you might be struggling with indecision as a smart entrepreneur is that you are waiting for certainty that your decision is the right one. That's never going to actually come until you make the decision. So this is a little bit different than the other one I mentioned before. That was like trying to figure out all the different things that could happen and trying to deal with those. This is really the issue where you have made the decision and you're like, this seems like the right thing to do, but then you pump the brakes on it because you're not sure if it's going to work. Certainty is not a prerequisite for a good decision. It is the byproduct of making a decision. You will never have certainty about how a decision is going to work out until you've made it and actually given it a run for its money. Unfortunately, I think this comes down to how we get trained in school, especially if you're a health professional like me. You basically get trained to believe that there is a standard procedure for like anything you're supposed to be doing, and you do the thing that you're told to do in the way you're told to do it, and you get the result that you're supposed to get. Entrepreneurship is not like that, and I think we all know that, even if it's like, we act like it's not a full like box of uncertainty, but we know that it is. A lot of entrepreneurs have this subconscious belief that they need to feel sure that something's going to work before they can actually commit to it. And that is the biggest block for people. Like, you've already made the decision, but you keep pumping the brakes on actually taking action on that decision, or you go back to it and you're like, did I really make the decision? It feels like you're protecting yourself from a bad outcome, but what it's actually doing is it's keeping you frozen in a holding pattern where you don't actually make the decision, nothing gets tested, and nothing ever actually gets resolved. And you never learn from the experience of what happens when I trust my gut and I make a decision. And the longer you wait for that certainty and you don't get that certainty, the more that's going to bleed into the confidence you have about everything else in your business. Whether it's this decision or another one, you really just start second guessing every single decision that you make, because this unresolved, like, I need to wait until I feel really certain about this decision, it's just casting a shadow over your entire ability to make decisions as an expert, as a CEO of your business. We have a client in our MBA program. That's the one that's wrapping up in August. She is building a program for disabled and chronically ill people who want to become parents. This is a very specific, important niche, very blue ocean, if you're familiar with the blue ocean strategy concept. Nobody is doing almost anything for this niche, and there's a lot of people who need help. So we had a coaching conversation where we talked about this niche, and she had like this huge light bulb moment about, oh my gosh, this is like an amazing niche. I should just go for it. But then 6 weeks go by and she shows up for another coaching call and had not really done anything with it because she still felt ambivalent about had she really locked in that niche. So because she was like, "Oh, I feel like I should do this, but I'm not sure. I don't know if this is going to work." It slowly contaminated every other decision she was trying to make about her business. Her offer, her messaging, it was even eroding her confidence in pretty much anything she was deciding on and her motivation to keep building. So she's in a very early phase of her business and she was like, all my motivation is fading. Like she had come out of the gate hot with this, like, oh my gosh, this niche is amazing. I feel so resonant with this. And then really just hit a wall with her motivation because she was like, I don't know. I don't know if this is going to work. I feel uncertain. And then it just kind of fizzled. Now, the good news is because she's in this program and she gets coaching, we were able to rekindle that excitement and rekindle that confidence in the direction she was going in. But we had to really identify the fact that the reason her motivation and her momentum was fizzling out is because she was waiting for certainty that this was going to be the right move, and that certainty was never going to exist. So once she realized that that confidence was only ever going to come from actually running the program, making the offers, speaking to real people, seeing who showed up, seeing who bought, seeing what they needed. Once that actually happened, that was going to be the proof of, is this the right move for her or not? So we didn't we didn't make her make any decisions. It was really just going back to that original decision and being like, you already made this decision. We just need to move forward with this decision being the one that you made. Now, the good news is that once she actually realized that this was the reason that she was losing momentum, she was able to maintain that momentum, right? So she was noticing, hey, like anytime I lose momentum, it's because I am worried about, is this going to work? Realizing that the work itself was going to be the proof of that really helped her keep going and getting back into the swing of that momentum that she had picked up. So this is really where you need to ask yourself, like, am I waiting for certainty that this is the right move to actually take action on this decision? We know it's not ever going to come. So if you are stuck in that, the only solution is just deciding, I am okay with uncertainty and I've made this decision and I'm going to just move forward with it, knowing that I can change it at any time. This is not being tattooed on my forehead. And the only way I'm ever going to know if this is the right move is to actually do it. That way of making decisions is probably one of the things that'll either make or break your success as a business owner. And so it is so important that you commit to making good enough decisions and not expecting that every decision is going to have certainty with the outcome. Reason number 7, our last reason, the decision requires a bigger identity than the one you fully stepped into yet. Sometimes your block on decision making has nothing to do with the options, what might happen in the future, your certainty around the outcome. It's that making this decision requires you to act like a version of yourself that you have not fully stepped into yet. So this is really highlighting the gap between how you currently see yourself and who the decision is asking you to be, and can you actually cross that gap? Going back to the identity piece, we already talked about how feeling like a decision affects how you see yourself can slow you down. But the other thing that can slow you down is if you don't believe you're ready for that decision, or you don't feel like you're good enough to make that decision, or you don't feel like you're smart enough or capable enough or talented enough or strong enough or whatever it is. The reason why this is different than a lot of these other blocks is because it's not an information problem, it's a self-concept problem. This shows up in things like raising your prices to a level that requires you to claim real authority in your industry. deciding to turn away poor fit clients. That requires believing that like perfect fit clients are actually coming your way and that you're going to make money even if you say no to people. Making a big pivot in your niche, like believing that you can move out of who you've been known as into somebody who is now showing up as a new version of yourself. Even owning expertise in a space where you feel like you're still figuring things out. That's where I am now. Like I am still in the process of figuring out exactly how I want to position my messaging, my marketing, what I stand for, what my niche is. That's a big identity gap that I am crossing right now. So this is something where deciding to be the person who can hold the decision is going to be the solution. We've seen a lot of our Foundry members being in this exact problem where they are shrinking back into a previous version of themselves, and that is what's causing them to have a hard time making decisions. So one of our clients was offering 3 different offers because that's what she thought she was supposed to do. That's what she thought was like the way to run her business, and she was outsourcing that decision. Once she gave herself permission to really claim what she wanted in her business, she actually removed all her low ticket offers and nailed down the one higher ticket offer she wanted to sell. Another one quit a job that she'd been wanting to quit and had been staying at longer than she should have. Another one raised her prices after months and months of deliberation. These were people who knew what they needed to do and knew what the right decision was, but the block was that they had yet to claim the identity of the kind of person who makes decisions like that. So a really specific example, I have a client who is a nurse practitioner who runs a new functional medicine practice. She's got a membership program, higher ticket stuff. She had already priced her offer like months ago. Honestly, I think she had already priced it before we started working together. She had already sold spots into it. She had already done the math to decide what her programs were going to be priced at. She'd done all that work and made all those decisions. It was on her website, like could not have been any more clear that she had made that decision. Then someone in her business, another practitioner she works with, offhandedly questioned, well, maybe the price is too high. Just like offhand. There was no reason to question it. She was just like, I don't know, that seemed kind of expensive. And then suddenly my client was back in the question around, is this actually the right price? Am I charging the right amount? Is it too high? Should I lower it? Like, is this a good price? Like she had already made this decision and now she's back in it. And now she's wasting mental energy trying to make a decision that she had already made. So when we looked at it together on the call, because she asked me like, do you think it's too high? Nothing had changed. The value was all the same. The math was still mathing. The decision she had made was the right one. Like I said, she had already sold people into that price point. What had happened was that somebody else's discomfort with that number had gotten into her head, and she is still in that gap of standing firm in her identity as a high ticket, cash pay health provider. And she let that reopen a door that she had already closed. So my coaching was very simple here. The math was very clear. The value of everything that she was providing was way higher than what she was charging. She already knew that what she was charging was appropriate for the delivery, not only the deliverables of the service, but the transformation she was providing. I basically was like, listen, you already made this decision. You already know that this price is appropriate. If anything, it might be even low. You do not need to relitigate your price every time somebody raises an eyebrow. And I told her that I would love for you to just be able to trust your own judgment about these kind of things and not let other people's discomfort cause you to like revisit all of these decisions. Because I really do believe she trusted that that was the right move. And it was just this like little bug in her ear about, I don't know, maybe that's too high. And then she was back in that same decision. So for this person, the block was not, oh, I need more information about this. I need to like consider my options. Like she had already made the decision. She just had not yet fully inhabited the version of herself who sells at this level, this price point without flinching. She is somebody who has like, this is a new offer for her. This is a new way of selling things. This is a new identity for her. And she is working to really step into that person who's able to hear people think, hey, maybe this is too expensive, and not let that impact her decisions. So really fully claiming the value of her offer and this new identity that she was stepping into was going to be the work for her to nail down that decision and not keep questioning it. All right. So those are the big blocks. And now I'm going to talk really quickly about how do you actually get out of this, because this is getting long of this episode. I was like, this is going to be a 30 to 45-minute episode. Now we're over an hour. But this is important, right? You really need to be able to make good decisions in your business that help you move your business forward. And I want to make sure you understand why you're struggling, why you're spinning, how to stop spinning, and then how to actually make the decision. So step one, and all of these tips I'm going to give you are based on actual research for what helps people make decisions. Step one is to figure out which of those blocks you're in before you do anything else, because the intervention is going to be totally different depending on what the actual block is. If you are like super stressed out from stuff going on in your life, you need to regulate first and then get into decision mode. If you are dealing with an unnamed constraint that you have not addressed, you need to actually think about what is the full picture of this decision. You're not going to just be able to make that decision without the full context. And then if it's an identity problem, no amount of new information is going to solve that problem, right? Like my client who was revisiting that pricing question, she's not going to get to a place where she's done enough research to make that decision feel good. She had to step into that identity of, yes, I can sell an offer at this price point. So we want to make sure the tool actually matches the block you're in, because otherwise you're going to be solving the wrong problem. Now, one way you can make a decision, this is going to sound a little counterintuitive, but actually try to make a case for the option that you have been either avoiding or questioning or feeling like that is not the right decision to make. So you want to ask yourself, what are the 3 most compelling reasons that this decision that I think could be wrong might actually be correct? So research on what's called bias reduction shows that if you actually make a case for the thing that you think is the wrong answer, it removes a lot of that decision bias that causes you to make decisions based on preconceived beliefs that you have instead of looking at the full picture. So what this is going to do is either it's going to change your mind and you're going to realize, oh, actually that decision I thought was the wrong decision is actually the right one. Or it makes your original decision feel so much more obvious that now you feel confident that you had made the right decision, which is either of those are good, right? Like if you're like, oh, that thing I thought was the wrong way to go is actually sounds like a good thing. Or you're like, man, this is not a good reason to make this decision. I think I'm going to stick with the decision that I already made. Super useful. Another thing you can do is called running a pre-mortem. So a lot of times we've heard the term post-mortem, which is assessing what happened and what went wrong and what went well after a decision has already been made. Running a pre-mortem is actually putting yourself into that future state before the decision is finalized. So this was developed by a psychologist named Gary Klein. Studies show that running a pre-mortem actually surfaces about 30% more potential problems than standard planning. So basically what happens is before you commit to your decision, you want to imagine yourself in the future and imagine that the decision turned out to be a mistake. I know that sounds like kind of weird, but you want to think about, okay, if this decision fails, let me mentally work backwards to ask what would have caused that failure. The reason this works is because your brain can explain things that have already happened better than it predicts future failures. So instead of it being like, well, what if this happens? Your brain actually acts as if it already did happen and it looks backwards. This is something that works a lot in neurolinguistic programming as well. It basically just puts your brain into a different state and causes you to look at it as if it already happened. So if you treat failure like it's already happened, it unlocks a completely different way of thinking about it than if you are trying to predict future failures. So this is really the difference between thinking what could go wrong and actually saying, like, imagine it did go wrong. What happened that caused that? Like I said, your brain actually will go into a different gear of problem solving when you act as if something has already happened. This is actually the opposite of how goal setting usually works. Really good goal setting puts you out in the future to say, okay, this thing succeeded beyond my wildest dreams. What did I have to do to get there? Doing the opposite of that is also another way to make good decisions. So the way you do this is you write a paragraph starting with, it is X date, December 31st, 2026. And this decision was a mistake. Here's what happened that made this decision a mistake. And then you just let your brain actually find what those failure points would have been. Like I said, the research shows that this actually surfaces 30% more potential problems that you can actually plan for than if you just try to imagine all of the different ways that it could go wrong. So you're not being pessimistic. You're actually just using your brain's strongest reasoning function to do real risk management before you commit to something. This is great if you're somebody who, again, you're looking for that certainty. You know you're not going to get certainty, but at least you know you've done your due diligence. It can make you feel a lot more confident that you can move forward with that decision. Another way to make decisions, especially if you're feeling really in your head about things, is to ask yourself what you would tell a client who is in your exact situation. So, psychologist Ethan Kross has spent 15 years researching the concept of self-distancing. Self-distancing is when you actually remove yourself from your own perspective. It's kind of like that meta perspective, right? Like it's you looking at you as somebody different. Being able to do that, this is actually something we do in NLP as well. Being able to do that actually reduces emotional reactivity and improves reasoning quality. So if you pull yourself out of your actual body and you imagine that you're sitting across from yourself as a client, ask yourself, what would you tell somebody sitting across from you with this exact set of facts and options? When you actually put your brain into that mode of advising someone else, you start to draw on your expertise and values, not your own fear and ego investment. Because if you are making the decision for yourself, you're going to have a lot more emotions about it than if you were making the decision for somebody else. So the advice that you would give somebody else is almost always based on what you already know and what you already feel is the right way to do it. And that self-distancing can actually help you remove the emotional charge out of the decision. Another thing you can do to help make better decisions is to turn your decision into an if-then plan. So instead of saying, I will deal with that later this week, or I will, figure it out when it comes up, if there's something that you think is actually going to happen or you know is going to happen, you say, when this exact situation happens, I will do this exact action. So this has been tested in over 640 independent studies by psychologist Peter Gallwitzer. And this shows that there's roughly twice the amount of follow through when you have that specific, when this happens, I will do this type of belief instead of just a vague intention. So instead of saying like, okay, I know I have to have that hard conversation, I will have it soon, you actually say, let's say it's me and my husband, when we sit down Sunday evening, I will tell him what I've decided and ask him for his response. Actually making that decision on a timeline is going to massively increase the likelihood that you're going to follow through on it. So it takes that decision out of future use hands. So instead of being like, now I have to make the decision later, you actually make it now and make it really easy for yourself to just do the thing you decided on. So that way, when the trigger arrives, so either if it's like something that you know is going to happen or you think is probably or even possibly going to happen, when you make the decision now, if the thing happens, you just follow through on the decision you already made. So if you're one of those people that will like come up with all these things that, what if this happens? What if that happens? Just say, okay, what if it does happen? This is what I'll do. It actually makes the decision feel way easier. Another research recommended strategy is to actually write down the decision and then schedule a 90-day review. The reason this is really helpful is because it actually helps you make better decisions in the future when you have been able to learn from the decisions you're making now. And if you don't have a written record of why you made the decision and what you thought was going to happen and, all those things that actually inform your decision in the short term, your brain will rewrite history after the outcome. So psychologists call this hindsight bias. You feel like, oh, I knew that was what was going to happen, or I knew it was going to go that way, even though you actually had no idea, right? So you're like, oh, I knew that was going to happen if I made this decision. No, you didn't. You really didn't. And so if you don't write down why you made the decision and what you think is going to happen, it makes it impossible for you to actually learn for the future, because one of the really important things about making decisions is actually learning from your current decisions to make better decisions moving forward. So what you're going to do is you're going to write down 4 things. You're going to write down what you decided, why you decided, what you expect to happen, and when you'll check back. And then you actually put this in your calendar. You put the note in your calendar to actually revisit what you decided, and then you look at what actually happened. So that way you can actually see, hey, am I actually accurately predicting things? And if not, what did I think was going to happen? What actually happened? That is actually where the skill of judgment gets built, but it can only work if you're tracking it. If you just like make a decision, you never think about it again, and you come back 6 months later and you're like, oh, that's how it worked out. Your brain is going to rewrite the story for you, and then you're not actually going to get the full experience of trusting your judgment moving forward. So those are some of the really helpful ways to make decisions. But like I said, ultimately, the most important thing is to find what is blocking the decision in the first place. So as a reminder, there's 7 common blocks for smart entrepreneurs that are struggling with indecision. Number 1, you're solving the wrong question entirely. Number 2, an emotion that has nothing to do with the decision is actually running the show, and you need to deal with that emotion. Number 3, the decision has become a verdict on your identity, and you're making it mean something about who you are to make that decision. Number 4 is that you're trying to solve for every possible future before you actually finalize the decision, which you can't do, so stop trying to do it. Number 5, something true has not been said out loud yet. You have not identified a constraint, a reality, a situation that is actually needing to inform the decision, and you have not identified it yet. Number 6, you're waiting for certainty that only comes from after that decision is made and executed. Number 7, the decision asks you to claim an identity that you have not fully stepped into yet. Those are the most common. They're not the only blocks that'll ever come up, but generally you're going to find it falling into at least one of those buckets. What I want to leave you with is that the goal is not to become someone who never struggles with decisions. As you grow in your business, decisions are going to get harder and harder because you're just going to be dealing with bigger problems. So don't expect to never have hard decisions to be made again. The goal is to become someone who believes and trusts that you can actually figure out what is making it hard, and then use the right tool for the specific block that you're dealing with and move on the decision. Even if it's not perfect, even if it's uncomfortable, even if you don't feel completely ready, even if you're like, I don't know what's going to happen when I make this decision, but I'm going to make it anyway. Being a person who makes decisions and trusts your ability to figure things out is literally the most important skill that you can build as an entrepreneur. Every decision that you make, even if you make the wrong decision, is going to make the next one a little easier and going to make you even more capable of making decisions in the future. So think about a decision that you need to make and use what we talked about today to just make it. Now, everything that I covered in this episode today is the foundation of the work that I am bringing into my 6-month mastermind that we are launching this year that I am calling the Decision Room. So I mentioned earlier that I had been thinking about, do I want to run one? Do I not? And that was a decision I was circling for a while. And I was like, you know what? I know why I'm struggling with this decision. I'm going to deal with those reasons, and I'm just going to go for it because this has been circling my brain for months now. So I am launching a mastermind. It's 6 months. It's called the Decision Room. We're going to run it from July through December of this year, 2026. This is a group for experienced coaches, consultants, and practitioners who are already at least the 100K per year mark, and you're done spinning on decisions. You're done second guessing yourself. You're done slowing down your process and your progress as a business owner because you just feel like, I don't know what I don't know. I don't know what I'm making a decision around here. I don't see my blind spots. I don't want to be stuck on this for months and months and months and waste tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars of potential revenue from being stuck in this indecision. You're ready to build that decision-making clarity that actually compounds over time. And you're ready to make decisions that move your business forward. So details are still forthcoming, but the plan is to have regular group sessions, both on specific teaching moments, diagnostic moments, as well as hot seat question and answer sessions where our small group gets coached on real decisions and we're going to work through them live. There will be quarterly one-on-one deep dives with me personally to help you go deep on any decisions you need to make and any plans you need to come up with to move your business forward. We'll have opportunity for unlimited one-on-one support during those in-between call times. So that way, if something comes up between sessions, you're not waiting weeks to get unstuck. We're going to have a 2-day in-person retreat because I really do think a lot of this work needs to happen in a room together, surrounded by your decision maker peers. And we'll do a diagnostic intake assessment at onboarding. So that way I know exactly where you're starting. You know exactly where you're starting. We both are on the same page about where you're going, and we can really uncover those blocks together so that you can make the most out of that 6 months. This is going to be a small group, max 15 spots, and we're going to actually kick off in July of 2026, which is in a couple of months from now. So if you heard yourself in any of those 7 patterns today, if you know that you have so much potential in your business that is untapped because you are swirling in decision making and there's too many decisions and not enough clarity and not enough blind spot monitoring to be able to make those decisions in a way that feels really good, and you want to be around not only a mentor who has probably made a lot of those decisions that you're circling, as well as peers who have as well, this is the container to do that work in. So I'm super pumped about this because I really do think that confident decision making is literally the key that's going to unlock you hitting 200, 300, 500K, 7 figures in your business. And that is what we're going to do in this mastermind. So if this is at all of interest to you, it is by application only, and we're going to have limited spots. Please DM me the word mastermind on Instagram if you want to learn more about this and apply. I am going to be opening up the actual application very soon. It's going to be first come, first serve as far as who qualifies to be in the room and actually gets a spot and then locks in their spot with their investment. And I'm happy to chat more details about if you're ready for this, if this is the right fit, if this is going to help you get an ROI on the things you want to accomplish this year. But I'm super excited about this because I really do think from all of my experiences working with coaches and being in a mastermind, everything that always felt the most valuable to me was around making clear, confident decisions and actually moving forward on those decisions and not coming back to them and, relitigating them. And I really think that for a lot of people, the reason that they are struggling with that is because they're doing it in isolation. Running a business, especially a multi-6+ figure business, is something that not a lot of people are doing. And you may not know anybody personally that really is at the level that you're at. And it can be very hard to make those decisions when you don't have anyone to talk to who has been where you are and is going where you want to go. So I would love to hear from you if you think that this could be a good fit for you. DM me on Instagram, the word mastermind. We'll chat details. And if it sounds like it's a good fit, I will share the link to apply. I am super excited about this. It's, like I said, something I've been back and forth on if I wanted to do or not this year, but I just had this stroke of inspiration after seeing so many people talking about decision making in all of the programs that we're in, and even just seeing the impact when I myself have gotten slowed down by decision making. And I'm like, this needs to exist for my higher level clients, this opportunity to be around people who can help you make these decisions. So let me know, DM me the word mastermind. Otherwise, I hope that this was super valuable for you. We're going to keep talking about decision making in the future because it is so important, but this is really that intro to why you get stuck on decisions and what to do to make good decisions moving forward. So feel free to let me know if this affected any decisions you've made recently, and I'll look forward to seeing you here next week on the Nourished CEO podcast. Bye, y'all. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Nourished CEO podcast. And if this episode got you thinking about how you're actually wired to run your business, your next step is to take the CEO type quiz. Because here's the thing, most of the business advice out there was built for someone specific. And if that someone isn't you, it doesn't matter how hard you work or how many strategies you implement. It's just never going to feel right, and it's never going to work as well as it should. Knowing your CEO type changes all of that. After you take the quiz, your results page will walk you through your natural strengths, your biggest blind spots, and a concrete game plan for your offers, messaging, sales, and even your calendar, all built around how you actually think and lead. Not generic advice, your specific direction. It takes about 5 minutes and it's completely free.
The link is in the show notes, or you can go to lauraschoenfeld.com/quiz. And if you already know your type and this episode resonated with you, share the quiz with someone else who needs it. The right framework at the right time can completely change how someone sees their business. And honestly, that's exactly why I made this. All right, I'll see you next time on the Nourished CEO podcast.